Welcome tonight to our Traveling Thursday. We are traveling to Indonesia tonight. And for those of you who have been on many of our webinars, this is the second time we're traveling to Indonesia tonight. And it's actually a different destination. We're going to Raja Ampat, which has been for many years the bucket list destination for our travelers and for divers. You know that we want to start usually by just introducing a few things on what we're going to do tonight, give you a little bit of an overview. Where is Raja Ampat and where is Misool? That's what we're going to be discovering today. And what makes this area so special? You'll be hearing about that. And you'll hear a little bit about how Misool started. It's a pretty interesting story. And then, of course, you'll be hearing from Misool Eco Resort and also the Misool Foundation. And then there is going to be a Q&A at the end. So keep your questions more towards the end. You can then type them in the chat room and we will get to answering them at that time. There is a draw tonight as well, and condition is that you stay in our presentation until the draw. If you're not present, you can't win. Tonight is our last webinar for our spring season, and we don't know yet the next date. It will be in the fall, and so you can submit some destination suggestions to us, but we don't actually know the next date yet. I want to introduce Fly and Sea Dive Adventures to you. If you're participating for the first time, you will not have seen this yet. Fly and Sea Dive Adventures, there's our team there, 6 of us. We have been diving and traveling and arranging people's dive vacations for almost 25 years. And dive travel is all we do. There is a combined 78 years or so experience among us. And we have been collectively probably to all the corners of the world. I think, no, actually, none of us have been to Antarctica yet. So that is on our bucket list too. We represent pretty much all the major dive destinations in the world, 100 plus resorts and over 80 liveaboards. And we are IATA appointed, which means we have all the proper licenses to also issue tickets ourselves, which also means that we have control over how flights are being administered and details like that. And then we arrange group travel. A lot of people on this call here today have been on one or more of our group trips. The majority of them we offer through dive shops all over North America, and then also individual travel, when you want to go, where you want to go, how long you want to go. We offer custom trips as well. That's us, Fly and Sea Dive Adventures. I would like to introduce you to Kristen.
Hi, everybody. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really happy to be able to share with you an overview of Misool Resort and its origins, and to highlight some of the reasons you might want to put us on your list to visit. So as Petra said, I'm Kristen Harcott, and I'm Misool's reservations manager. So together with your agent at Fly and Sea Dive Adventures, I'd be the one assisting with the planning of your stay. So this presentation, we call it Redefining Sustainable Tourism, an island love story featuring shark finners, tropical boils, unflagging optimism, and the preservation of the world's richest reefs in Raja Ampat, Indonesia. I should start by defining what and where Misool is for anyone who's unfamiliar with the resort or the general area. So Misool is a geographic location in the eastern part of Indonesia within the region of Raja Ampat, which you can see represented by the pink circle up above. And Sorong is the region's largest town, and it's the access point for all of the dive resorts and liveaboards in the area. And Misool is one of the 4 main islands that comprise the archipelago of Raja Ampat. There's about 1,700 smaller islands, but that number does vary a bit depending on who's counting and what they feel constitutes an island. And you can see the larger landmass at the bottom, that's Misool Island, and we're one of the smaller islands down near the edge of the circle, and that's our resort island. So Misool is a region in Raja Ampat, and it's the name of one of the 4 largest islands, and it's also the name of our private island resort, which was started in 2005 by our founders, Andrew and Merritt Miners. And lastly, Misool also comprises our registered Indonesian charity, which is a separate nonprofit entity, the Misool Foundation. So here's a nice aerial shot of the resort, which, as I mentioned, is on its own private island, just a little south of the bigger island that's called Misool. And the resort began in 2005, and the foundation came a few years later, but both of them were started in aid of the same goal, and that's to protect the world's richest reefs. And the world's richest reefs is not a clever marketing tagline that we've come up with, as great as it sounds, but it's based on scientific fact. So we've been lucky enough over the years to host a number of scientists, and we've been the subject of several independent studies, and the consensus is always the same. And that's that this region is particularly special, and it's one of the few underwater places that just continues to thrive year after year, which is different from the dire news you normally hear about the oceans. It's one of the things that makes the Misool region so unique. And according to marine biologist Dr. Mark Erdman, who heads up the marine programs for Asia Pacific for Conservation International, some of you might have seen this in the Tales by Light show that aired on Netflix a little while back. He says, Misool's reefs represent one of only a handful of places in the world where biodiversity is improving rather than declining. And Dr. Erdman goes on to say, there's greater biodiversity, that is to say, a larger number and greater diversity of fish, coral, and mollusks on these reefs than anywhere on Earth. So at the moment, we're at over 1,600 different species of fish, but this number changes it changes pretty regularly because we keep discovering new ones. And that number refers only to reef fish, so we're not even including the many pelagics in the area. When it comes to coral, a single football field sized patch of Misool's reefs has nearly 5 times the number of coral species as the entire Caribbean Sea. Because of where we're situated in the Coral Triangle, we've got different currents rushing in, pulling all kinds of nutrients into the area, and we're really fortunate to see a wide variety of both hard and soft corals covering the reefs. So many of you are likely familiar with Dr. Sylvia Earle. You might have seen some of her really incredible TED Talks or the documentary about her foundation's work, Mission Blue. Her foundation identifies places in the world that are seen as critical to the overall health of the oceans, and the Misool Marine Reserve was designated one of Mission Blue's hope spots. Dr. Earle called Misool a shining beacon of hope within the Coral Triangle. The sheer abundance and diversity of life within the Misool Private Marine Reserve is unparalleled. You can see in this photo, it's one of the resort's founders, Merritt, swimming in our stingless jellyfish lake that's about an hour from the resort. And we're really lucky with the diversity of species we see around the resort and the nearby reefs. There's just a really healthy, thriving balance. You can see some lionfish here in this photo, and they're meant to be here. It's okay to be excited to see them. And we have several endemic species in the area. So on the bottom here in front of the sea fan, we've got a Raja Ampat epaulette, or walking shark. And this is one that tends to be on a lot of people's bucket lists. They're a little bit nocturnal, and so there's a few spots we find them on night dives or snorkels, and they're always kind of on the rocks looking for little crabs and critters. And the Raja Ampat pygmy seahorse is another one that people really like to come and see. So there's just an incredible array of life under the water and the nearby dive sites. And our reefs have been featured in the IMAX film Journey to the South Pacific and the BBC series Life and Our Planet, and also Tales by Light, which I think I mentioned. So they're getting quite famous. This photo here was taken in our lagoon right in front of the restaurant. And this area can serve as a protected area for litters of blacktip reef shark pups. And we've got juvenile and adult blacktip reef sharks that kind of patrol the lagoon. And we even sometimes see mating behavior here, normally in April. And you'll recall at the beginning, I mentioned that this island love story included shark finners. And the spot where this photo was taken is actually the site of a former shark finning camp. So the unbelievable beauty of the area was what drew the founders, Merritt and Andrew, here in 2005. Andrew had been working on a liveaboard in the area for several years, and he'd previously met Merritt and asked her to join him for a month-long trip on the liveaboard. And this was supposed to be their third date, this month-long liveaboard trip. And spoiler alert, the date did go well, and they're currently at the resort right now with their 9-year-old son. So during this month-long diving adventure, they just explored the entire area of Raja together and just immersed themselves in its beauty. And Andrew showed Merritt how beautiful and magical the area was, and she was blown away by the variety of what she saw under the sea and on all the dive sites. And they saw everything except for sharks. And it wasn't until near the end of the few weeks that Merritt encountered her first shark. They arrived at what's now the resort island for a surface interval. And unfortunately, the first sharks she saw on that trip were dead ones. The first time Merritt and Andrew visited the island where the resort is now, they encountered a shark finning camp. So I'm sure you're probably all already familiar with this practice already. Shark finning refers to the practice of cutting fins off of live sharks, mostly to supply the massive shark fin soup trade. And up to 100 million sharks per year are slaughtered just for the fins, because that's one of the world's most expensive seafood products. The actual meat of the shark isn't worth very much, so that's why it's tossed back into the ocean. And this disparity in value between the meat and the fins means that they just cut the fins off, and then the shark is still alive when it's tossed back in. And the fins only comprise about 3% of the shark's body weight. And all of the species that are targeted for shark finning commonly are critically endangered. I think there's about 14 different species. And we know that removing the apex predator from any ecosystem just destabilizes the whole food chain. And in Indonesia, so much of the population lives close to the ocean. They rely upon it as their primary food source. So this egregious overfishing of sharks is not in anyone's best interest. So Merritt and Andrew had this great idea to build a conservation center on the island. Now, bear in mind, the resort island at this point is an island with no source of fresh water, as remote as can be, and it's currently inhabited by shark finners. But they knew that something had to be done. So pretty soon after this, Andrew quit working on the liveaboard, and that's when he started looking into how to finance a conservation center. So they had no network in the area, no experience doing this, no relevant education. As a first step, they located the traditional owners of the island and the surrounding reefs. And they met with the local community, and it was really helpful at this point. Andrew was already fluent in Indonesian, and they quickly learned that it wasn't the local community members who were fishing the sharks. It was outsiders who were offering to pay to fish in the area. So the locals, the people in the surrounding villages, have control over the land and the water and the reefs. And the community was in a situation where some people were coming in and asking to fish and paying for the privilege, and others, these long-line fishermen, were coming in without their support or knowledge and just fishing anyway. So from the community members' perspective, it was more beneficial to allow some fishing and receive a bit of compensation in return, rather than saying no and having people kind of sneaking in anyway. So Merritt and Andrew began discussing with the community the option of a kind of reverse fishing agreement. So this would be where the community would receive regular lease payments and the area would be closed to all fishing. So this was discussed over a number of town hall style meetings. It was over the course of several months. And the community already understood the value of a protected area because they were already practicing the rotation of their fishing areas. So they knew the benefit of having an undisturbed protected area and how it would increase numbers in other areas. So the lease was signed in 2005, and the total marine protected area today is 300,000 acres. So for us Canadians, it's 1,220 square kilometers. It's about the size of the 5 boroughs of New York City, or I think just under twice the size of Singapore. And one really important thing to note about the no-take zone is you can see in the top left of the photo where the villages are located. They're all outside the protected area. So it's far enough away from these villages that they've got tons of great fishing ground, but it's still close enough that the fishermen benefit from the spillover effect due to the increased biomass within the protected area. Once the conservation area and its boundaries were established, Merritt and Andrew then shifted focus to enforcement because at the end of the day, without any enforcement, it's just lines on a map. And it wasn't going to mean all that much without somebody enforcing them. So using a tiny plastic dinghy, Andrew and Merritt and the first 5 local staff members, they would go out on patrol and they expelled all of the shark finners and the fishermen from the area. It was a really tireless and relentless job. And in fact, it still is. This is still going on. And they shouted at them and confiscated a lot of miles and miles of nylon long lines. They threw catch from poachers back into the sea. And it was around this time when they started seriously thinking about how they were going to fund this conservation project. So Andrew's life savings was about 20,000 pounds, Great British pounds. They were very, very rapidly depleting, and they needed a means to fund this conservation work. They knew it urgently needed to be done. From that, the idea for the resort was born as a sort of a vehicle to provide a revenue source for this conservation. So they mobilized a group of investors, pretty small group, who were like-minded conservationists and some dreamers, and they were people who were interested in helping them realize this dream of building a resort. The main goal of their presence in the area was to protect and conserve. So they made the decision pretty early on that, of course, they wanted to build the resort with as little environmental impact as possible. So this means not cutting down a ton of trees. And in fact, the entire resort was built without cutting down a single tree. It's entirely built of reclaimed wood. So ordering timber within Indonesia usually means you're impacting orangutan habits. And what they found, though, was that on the beaches of the resort island and the nearby uninhabited islands, they were full of driftwood that had washed up over the years. There was lots of trees back in the jungle that had naturally fallen, and you can see some here. And it was beautiful tropical hardwood, and the local community gave their permission for this to be used. And they found that as they cleared the fallen and washed up trees from the beaches, the sand shifted, and there were even more under the sand. There was quite a stockpile under the sand as well. So this photo here was taken on our South Beach, and we now have 7 villas there. It's Torben with the chainsaw, and it was a really small team in the beginning. It was Andrew, Merritt, and a few friends, and a couple of local workers, and they set about milling and processing all of the timber that was available. And they used the portable sawmill that you see here, of course, being operated with absolutely no safety equipment or protective gear. It's a bit of a work-safe nightmare. And this portable sawmill can be set up and broken down by 2 people in about 20 minutes. And it was just ideal for what they needed at the time because it was easier to move the sawmill than to move these logs. Of course, they had no crane or anything like that. So while all of this preliminary construction was going on, this was their accommodation, these rather rustic tent structures. And they were open air, open to monitor lizards and coconut crabs, and even a few rats that were left over from the remnants of the shark finning camp. Very, very far from luxurious. And in this picture, it's a little grainy, but you can see Andrew, a very ill Andrew, lying in the tent there. And fresh water at this point was so precious, they had to learn how to use it really sparingly. And there was an order of priorities, the first being boiled for drinking. And second, they used fresh water for cooking. Third was for making concrete, because you can't, unfortunately, make concrete with salt water. And fourth, way down on the list, was personal hygiene. So that meant that any little scrape could get pretty easily infected. And as I earlier alluded to, that's where the tropical boils come in. On the left is Merritt, and she's trying to cook over a campfire there, not an easy task. And everyone's diet at this point consisted primarily of white rice and instant noodles. And they were pretty malnourished, and the chemical content in those horrible packaged noodles was not helping the tropical boils. And despite all of this, in days where morale was understandably pretty low, they were making progress. So this is the beach of our North Lagoon, and the beginnings of what will become the restaurant. And you can see all of that beautiful wood stacked up there. And it's just incredible to think that, again, no trees were harmed in the making of this resort. It's really special. So throughout the 2.5 years of building and malnourishment, they kept patrolling the no-take zone and still fending off the illegal fishermen. And this really underscored for them the fact that setting up a protected area was pretty useless without a means to patrol it. So they would go out at night after a full day of building, and eventually they were able to fund their own patrol boat and get local community members to act as rangers. And some of these used to work as shark finners themselves. So in late 2008, we finally opened doors to the first guests, which was very, very special. So you can see in the photo here, there's 5 of our 8 water cottages and the dive center on the left there, with the jetty that extends out into the channel. And this lagoon, and our house reef, goes just around the outside of it. And we realized pretty quickly that unless we were providing English lessons and on-the-job training, the workforce was going to be unemployed as soon as we opened. So here in this photo is Lasali, and he was a carpenter originally in the early days, and he spoke only a few words of English, but really eager to learn, and he is now transitioned and is the head waiter in our restaurant. And it's a huge point of pride that we managed to retain most of the workers as Misool transitioned from a building site to a functioning resort with guests. There was lots of that on-the-job training, as I mentioned, and intensive English classes. And many of the laborers who'd been involved since the first days of construction made that switch over to being waiters and housekeepers, cooks, and dive guides. And now, between the resort and the foundation, Misool currently employs over 200 people. Merritt and Andrew wanted to use local labor as much as possible, just so that the community would benefit and experience that sense of ownership over the project and the resort. But they also did need kind of specific expertise in things like building on sand and grass roofing and just building in this specific climate. So they needed a crew of pretty skilled craftsmen, and they couldn't find them locally, so they retained a team, and you can see them in the photo here, of Javanese craftsmen. But they paired them with local laborers so that the local people would also learn the skill. So between 2005, when construction first began, and 2011, 3 years after we opened to guests, the resort was the sole source of funding for the conservation work. So throughout all of the building stages and the opening of the resort was funding the Ranger Patrol. And happily, Misool Foundation was registered as an Indonesian charity in 2011. So since registering the foundation as an independent charitable organization, it allowed us to partner with some of the NGOs that were already doing work in the area, Wild Aid, the Nature Conservancy, and of course, Conservation International, and very recently, Our Children's Earth. And it allowed us to collect donations and expand our projects. And the Misool Foundation team includes our 15-person strong Ranger Patrol, and they're supported by the Marine Police and Army officers. The two gentlemen you see on either side of the Rangers in the gray shirts are Marine Police. So they're actually government employees whose salaries are supplemented by Misool, and they assist with the enforcement of the no-take zone. And the team guards the area 24 hours a day. We have 3 ranger stations, and they move between the stations and the resort. And because if we had set patrol times, the fishermen would just adapt to this. We don't have a set schedule, and we adjust the patrol times based on fishing activity. And one thing that's really exciting is we're looking into using more drone technology to improve the patrol's effectiveness. And this would help us really cut down on our fuel consumption. Our general manager, he's really into droning, and this would help us use technology for more of the surveillance piece, and then have the rangers responding to individual incidents. The annual budget for the ranger program is around $300,000, and about half of that is fuel costs. But no matter how the patrols are done, what we've seen firsthand is that it's absolutely necessary. And the effect of stopping fishing in this area has been incredibly profound. The biomass on our local reefs has increased by an average of 250% between 2007 and 2013 when the study was conducted. And at some sites, it's more than 600%. The shot here, for example, was taken on our house reef, and you can see pretty frequently horse-eyed jacks and huge schools of bumphead parrotfish, Malabar groupers. We've got reef octopuses and just lots of other species of fish. And along within our lagoon, green and hawksbill turtles and blacktip and whitetip and gray reef sharks. So just quite a diverse array. And the foundation has a few key projects aside from the ranger patrols, one of which is our community recycling project. It's called Bank Sampa, and this translates literally to garbage bank. It was established in 2014 to service the coastal communities in the area and the resort because there's no formal waste management infrastructure in these local villages. So people either typically dump their trash into the ocean or burn it. And Bank Sampa was established with the main goal of diverting ocean-bound plastics. We've worked our way up to now recycling about 2 tons of plastic a day. So this is plastic that, if it weren't taken elsewhere and recycled, would find its way back into the ocean and onto your dive site, no doubt. So Bank Sampa buys trash from the community members and incentivizes the proper disposal of garbage. And we have a couple of small warehouses in the different communities, and the supply boat from the resort picks up the materials and takes them to a bigger warehouse in Sorong, where it's packed down and sold. And then the funds from the recycled materials are then distributed back into the Bank Sampa members. We have more than 3,500 members. 70% are women and girls. So these young women here are holding their garbage bank books. And so it documents the weight and material of what they've brought in, along with the equivalent monetary value. And we found that a lot of women who aren't working, they're at home managing the household, they use it to supplement their family's income. And a lot of school kids now collect garbage as a means to help with their school fees. And the foundation has a really broad approach to conservation. So it's addressing not only the immediate environmental concerns, but also the larger social and educational and economic elements that affect the conservation piece. So we've got a few other projects. We built a kindergarten in a nearby village, and we sponsor some local primary school teachers. So a real focus on education. We also regularly distribute and rotate English language books, a lot of which our guests bring in to donate. And one day, some of these kids might they might be able to work for Misool or intern with us. But in any case, the opportunities that they'll have with a good educational background behind them will be of a benefit to them and the community at whole. We're also coming up on the 10-year anniversary of the Misool Manta Project, which provides detailed data and population monitoring to the government and NGOs. And it has the aim of influencing policy and working to ensure the protection and the long-term survival of the manta population in Indonesia. So hopefully this gives you a really good overview of the resort's origin and highlights the importance of our guests to the whole structure. The resort and its sister foundation, together with the community, they're all inextricably linked because everything's working together towards the common goal. The ecosystem here is really thriving because it's the central asset of the business, and likewise, the business is thriving because the ecosystem is flourishing. I've given you lots of reasons to want to come and visit. You might be wondering about the current situation with regards to traveling to the resort. Indonesia, unfortunately, is currently closed to foreign visitors. Since March 20th, 2020, the government stopped issuing tourist visas, and we don't yet have a confirmed reopening date. So what's recently been announced is a trial for reopening 3 green zones in Bali. And if that pilot project goes well, then expanding that to other areas in Indonesia, and Raja Ampat has been named as one that would follow. So there's definitely hope on the horizon. We've used this time without our international guests to adopt new policies and procedures in response to COVID. We are 165 kilometers from the nearest village, and every building on the resort island is open air. So we're already pretty naturally well set up. We don't have any enclosed areas with recirculated air to worry about. Our villas are all 10 meters apart, and we've changed our protocols in terms of sanitization in the common areas. And we've got mandatory quarantine periods and rapid testing for incoming staff. And we've changed the rotations. We're rotating out our staff a little bit less frequency. And we used to have sometimes a liveaboard would come by in the area and ask to come on site and have its guests take a look around at the resort. But we've suspended any on-site visits from anybody other than our staff and guests. So you can be assured that anybody at the resort has been recently tested. And we also have just done a lot of new protocols like daily temperature checks and by our on-site paramedic. And we've also had that paramedic overseen by a doctor based in Sorong. So we do have a section on the website that goes into detail about all of the COVID procedures, but we do hope that by the time you would visit, that it's not something you need to worry about. But until then, we're going to adhere strictly to all of the World Health Organization's guidelines. We are a smaller resort. We've got 20 villas and a maximum capacity of 40 guests at any one time. And so we have some accommodation that's built over water over in the North Lagoon, both water cottages and then a couple of larger villas, North Lagoon villas that have a living room area. And then we have 7 villas over on our South Beach, and some of them are built right down on the sand, and others are sort of tucked up back into the jungle with nice views out to the water. And to reach the South Beach from the North Lagoon area, the 2 areas of the resort are separated. It's up and over a hill. It's about a 7-minute walk. So it really has a very intimate and serene feel. We run set trips, so sort of similar to a liveaboard. You can come and visit for 7, 9, or 12 nights. And our guest speedboat makes the transfer between the resort and Sorong only on the scheduled arrival and departure dates. And it takes about 4 hours on our own, our custom-built speedboat. And it's a pretty comfortable trip now that we've got our own boat. And all of the rooms have air conditioning and fans inside. They're inside the mosquito netting there, so they're really effective when you put that netting down in the evenings. And you can see in this photo, back to the beautiful tropical hardwood, you've got little tunnels on the cabinetry and the headboard and the cabinetry on either side of the bed. Those are made by teredo worms, little marine bivalves that kind of tunnel into the wood and digest it. And they've been called termites of the sea, but I think they make for a very lovely design feature. And everything was built on site by our own carpentry team. So it means that the facilities really blend nicely into the surrounding environment. This is one of our North Lagoon villas. And in all the North Lagoon accommodation, there's steps right off the deck into the water so you can access the house reef. All of the villas have hot water and private outdoor showers. And we pretty recently installed a solar hot water shower system. So this holds about 200 liters of hot water. So even on periods where we've got a few days in a row of rain, which is actually a really rare occurrence, you've still got great hot water on demand. And this replaced our old propane on demand system and has allowed us to cut our natural gas consumption. We offer 3 guided boat trips daily and then a dusk or a night dive each day. And most of our dive sites are really close, between maybe a 3 to 15 minute ride from the resort. So normally we just come back to the resort in between dives. But we do have about 60 dive sites altogether, and we are discovering new ones as well. So sometimes we'll take a packed meal and head a little bit further out and do the surface interval on one of the many uninhabited islands. One of our most popular dive sites, it's about 15-20 minutes from the resort by boat, Magic Mountain. It's got 2 manta cleaning stations on it, about 25 meters and 7 meters depth. And you've got a really great chance of seeing 2 types of manta here. It's one of the few areas where you've got both oceanic and the smaller reef mantas interacting. There's just lots of great activities at the resort. I like to say that it's got such a great variety of dive sites, similar to a liveaboard. You're not getting bored with the same dive sites all the time, but it's also got all the land-based amenities. We've got kayaks and stand-up paddle boards. Great thing to do is to take the kayak and go around the entire circumference of the resort island or to one of the nearby islands. We've got excursions and a spa on site, and you can really be as busy or not, depending on what you're looking for. One of our most popular excursions is, I think we saw a photo of it early on in the presentation, is the Jellyfish Lake. It's a saltwater lake with non-stinging jellyfish that's about an hour from the resort, and then a short walk through the jungle. So that's definitely a favorite activity. And as our guests continue to visit and experience the magic of Misool, it allows us to continue protecting this beautiful area around us. And the guests really carry forward that excitement and enthusiasm with them. And it propels us towards the future. And using the revenue from our guest visits, we're continually making improvements. One such example is our ongoing conversion to solar energy. And we're planning out a pathway to zero carbon by 2025. So this is our 3rd year since the installation of the solar panels. We have just over 330 of them. And in peak season, they give us just about, I think, 60% of our power. And that's when we're at full occupancy with guests. But during the maintenance period, when we're not fully occupied, it comprises 100% of our power. So that's really exciting. And the hope is to be on 100% solar power when we're fully booked with guests pretty soon. I had hoped that I'd be able to share the newest thing we're working on with you, and that's an updated 360-degree tour of the resort. And that's going to be going live on our website soon. I was going to give you a sneak peek inside one of the water cottages and maybe the jetty so you could get a feel for what it's like when you arrive at the resort. But unfortunately, the technology isn't cooperating. So I've got the website address up here, and you can check that out within the coming weeks. It's a nice bit of escapism for all of us when we're not able to actually get out and travel right now, and you can actually view it on your phone, and you can move your phone around and it pans around the rooms. So really cool feature. It's kind of like those real estate tours where you can see in all the nooks and crannies. And now I'm going to turn it back over to the team at Fly and See. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Kristen. Fabulous. And I actually do have another treat because there is a video that we've chosen that I would actually share because it just plays a little bit better that way. Thank you, Kristen and team. That's just a fabulous video. And before we get to our Q&A, I just wanted to say a few more words. Yesterday was National Travel Advisor Day. Don't know if you knew that, but it's a great opportunity for me to thank all of you to be loyal clients, encouragers, and for joining our webinars. Means a lot to us and fuels our hope for a great travel future. Thank you to those of you who left some lovely comments on Facebook. It's been a challenging 14 months for all of us with ever-changing rules and updates. We've all been impacted, but to be honest, looking at the world overall, I think we're still pretty well off, so no complaints here. Many of you have had travel plans that were impacted and perhaps continue to be impacted. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. We know it's not a train, but we're not quite out of the woods yet, especially here in Canada. Our team here at Flying Sea Dive Adventures has worked hard to stay up to date on everything travel in every country, with every resort and liveaboard that we partner with. We have adapted, we've added new features, like our new digital itineraries that some of you have already experienced, and these webinars. So we're ready when you're ready to travel again. We appreciate your trust and your loyalty, and we promise to work hard on your behalf. We will not be satisfied simply recovering from last year. We're actually building for a future that will exceed your expectations, our expectations. And as we move into our 25th anniversary next year, stay tuned for some creative news on that. Today's webinar, as I mentioned at the beginning, is concluding our spring series, and we'll pick this up again in the fall. So make sure you read our newsletter, because that's where we will be announcing the starting date, the next date. And then we're also open for suggestions. So with that, we are going to open it up for questions. I am not sure we're going to get to all of them because there's a ton that came in. Irene is going to be monitoring this. Irene and Kristen, take it away.
Joan is asking, what is your connection to Mission Blue?
Well, we haven't actually hosted Sylvia Earle at the resort, but when she was in the area, her foundation, Mission Blue, designated the resort as one of the hope spots. So as I mentioned in the presentation, these are areas that are critical to the overall health of the oceans. And I think it was in 2017 that the Misool Marine Reserve was added to that. List of areas. So that's our connection.
Okay. I believe you mentioned this in the presentation, but Vanessa is asking, do the rooms have air conditioning?
Yeah. All of the rooms are built open air. So if there were air conditioning units just placed to cool the entire room, it wouldn't be as efficient. They've got these kind of funneled roofs that naturally kind of take the warm air and filter it up. But we've got air conditioning units positioned right over all of the beds along with fans. So guests typically put those on in the early evening before bed. And once you put the mosquito netting down, it really creates a very nice, cool environment to sleep.
Phil is asking, what vaccinations are required?
Currently none, and there's none that we particularly recommend or require at this time. A lot of people ask about malaria, and it is none of the staff at the resort take anti-malarials, but we've never had a case on the island, but it's probably a lot more prevalent in Sorong. But we just say ask your doctor, and depending on whether you have certain health conditions, you might consider something, but there's no vaccinations that are currently required or even recommended by us at the resort.
Christian is asking, what is the best time to go? Is there a storm season? And when is peak season?
Yeah, so our peak season runs from October through to May every year. And it's also possible to visit in the off-peak season in September and mid-May to mid-June. We do close every year. We have a regular annual closure from mid-June to mid-September. And this is because, sorry, the south winds come up, and this is our monsoon season. The winds come up from Australia, and just the weather's a lot more variable, rainy, windy then, and the visibility is really reduced. But unfortunately, this kind of coincides with the school year closure. So for children's holidays, it's not ideal because we're closed every year, mid-June to mid-September. But visiting between October and April, there's some times where there's better visibility, maybe February, March, but within that peak season, you've got fairly standard temperatures and pretty reliable weather from October to April. So that's considered our peak season.
John made a comment, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. The Misool Foundation has charitable status in Canada through Canada Helps. You'll receive tax credits for your donation. Are you familiar with that?
We have guests coming from so many different places, but it is a registered charity, and I know it's possible to get tax receipts in a number of countries, And we have, so the resort, whenever you book a trip with us, the resort donates $100 per person right away to the foundation on your behalf. And we have a guest matching scheme. And a lot of our guests do choose to match that sum and donate $100. So that contributes huge revenue to the foundation. And when you're at the resort itself, there's a number of opportunities if you want to learn about the charitable aspect of things. One that's very popular is our Adopt a Manta, because we've tagged so many mantas, and you can kind of follow your own individual manta. So a lot of our guests like to do that, and there's just a lot of ways when you're at the resort that you can really immerse yourself and find out about the different projects and get involved if you like, financially or otherwise.
What kind of land species are there to see?
There's not terribly many, just because the archipelago is comprised of so many tiny islands. The main thing you're going to see on the resort island is monitor lizards, and lots of them, and giant coconut crabs. Really shocking the first time you get up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom and see one. Right, it kind of looks like a huge spider. It's a bit nightmarish, but very neat. And again, because a lot of, and this is in I'm specifically talking about in one of the jungle villas. And there's a lot more of the creatures there, but there's no real larger exciting animal. Everything cool to see is going to be under the water for the most part.
What are the meal options?
Lots, they're plentiful, and there's of course a focus on local and fresh and sustainable food, just like the overall ethos of the resort. So we don't serve, for example, anything with palm oil. We don't serve red meat as of this past year, or the year before. Actually, this past year is COVID. And this is because the local red meat that we were getting in Indonesia wasn't of a consistently good quality. And then importing it, you're looking at bringing it in from Australia. And that's just it just doesn't fit in with what we're trying to do. So there's a lot of chicken and fresh reef fish, but sustainably caught from outside of the no-take zone, just depending on what the local fishermen are seeing. And a lot of beautiful fresh fruit. And one of the things we've really focused on this past year, as we've had no international guests, we've been able to really develop our hydroponic garden. So now we have, we're growing our own herbs, and it allows us to have beautiful greens that before would be brought in on a really slow supply boat from Sorong, and that really wilts your lettuce and your spinach and things like that. So it's really important to us to have that beautiful local fresh food. And we offer 4 meals daily plus a snack. So before you go out on your first dive, there's a cold breakfast for the early risers, and lots of fresh pastries. We've got a pastry chef on site. And then we have a hot breakfast in between the first and second dives, in between 8 and 11. And then we've got plated lunch and dinner, and 5 p.m. tea time with savory or sweet snack. And then we also have an all-day menu that you can choose from. So you will never go hungry at the resort. I can promise that.
Sunil is asking us about travel arrangements. So how do we get there from Canada?
Okay,
I think I'll answer this one. So from both Toronto and Vancouver, you can fly into Jakarta via one stop, one connection in Asia. It could be Hong Kong, it could be Tokyo, it could be Manila. Those are the major ones. So you arrive in Jakarta. Generally, it's an overnight stay at Jakarta Airport or close to the airport. Then it's a domestic flight from Jakarta to Sorong, and those are nonstop flights. And then you arrive early in the morning, and then the staff from Misool will meet you, and away you go to the resort. Mm-hmm. Return will be something similar, but you will have an overnight in Sorong, and then a flight to Jakarta. Then there may or may not have an overnight, and then back to North America with one connection out of Jakarta. For those who are in the States, it's generally the same from San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, most of the major cities.
The one downside of the resort, if there is one, is how long it takes to get there, because it is a bit of a trek. And coming from North America, I recommend a bit of a longer stay than 7 nights. You know, if we're used to going down south, the Caribbean or something, or Mexico, 7 nights is great. You can really unwind. But if you're going to go all that way, definitely a longer stay is kind of nice for those of us in North America. And what you're really benefiting from is the low traffic on the reefs. You know, they're so far, it takes so long to reach them, but because they've not been very heavily trafficked, you're really getting such a pristine diving experience.
Vanessa is asking, where did the name Misool come from, or what does it mean, or both?
I'm not sure, actually, strangely, if it has a meaning, other than it is the name of the region in Raja, and the name of the largest, one of the 4 big islands, and the one we're closest to. The name Raja Ampat means 4 kings, and that's in reference to the 4 big islands. But I don't think Misool has a direct meaning in English.
Kim is asking, is there a hiking excursion?
The hiking, it's a little tricky. I mean, not like, I don't know if Kim's local to BC, not like what we're used to, where you can go for a couple of hours, because again, these islands are all really small and quite steep and rocky. We do have a number of excursions that have shorter jungle hikes, but there aren't, well-blazed trails, again, because there's just not a lot of heavy traffic. So there's no call for long trails on these kind of rocky, steep outcroppings. But you can certainly explore our resort island. And one of the neat things you can do is you can climb up the steep hill and go and see our solar panels. And here, our general manager give you a nice tour of those. So that's always kind of fun.
Jennifer is asking, how many guests can there be at the resort at any one time?
Yeah, so there's a maximum of 40 guests at any one time in the 20 villas. So you get a really nice, intimate experience. There's another thing that you could consider as a downside is that the Wi-Fi connectivity isn't great. It's kind of, we like to say it's like 1990s dial-up, and Wi-Fi isn't available in any of the villas. And why I bring this up is because you really get such a great atmosphere. Everybody's kind of sitting around in the evenings talking about what they saw that day and where they're gonna dive the next day, and it's just a really lovely, disconnected, intimate atmosphere. Disconnected and intimate at the same time. Disconnected from TV and internet and all that kind of stuff. So it makes for a really special stay.
Think we're going to leave it at that. We want to get to the draw that we still have this evening. So let's just do that. And Kristen, before we go, we also definitely want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing all the expertise and the beautiful eye candy. And I think I echo the many comments in the chat that this definitely needs to get on our bucket list. Now, Irene will tell you, who's often tried to find availability at Misool and has to look 1, 2, 3 years in advance. Don't think you can get there still in 2022. I'm pretty sure you're sold out. Is that correct, Kristen?
We have availability for the last 2 trips in June in our off-peak season. So if that's something of interest to you, then we do have a couple of rooms left in June 2022. Otherwise, you're looking at 2023. And I will say, if you, the most popular accommodation is the water cottages. So if you want the nice overwater accommodation, which a lot of people prefer, then definitely book early.
So today's prize is a $250 in-resort credit and 2 T-shirts that are going to be mailed to you. So the way we do this here is that we bring up a website that has a random draw and then a list of everybody who registered, whether you're still here. That obviously depends on. So there were 134 registrants today. Number 3, oh my, okay. Roger Chambers. Oh. There we are. Okay, Roger. Fabulous. Congratulations. And again, thank you for joining us today. We, like I said, make sure that you are on our newsletter. If you have registered for this, then you definitely get our newsletter. Pay attention to it. There's our phone number, our email address, and hopefully we will see you again in the fall. I'm thinking mid to late September. By then, the world hopefully looks very different than it does now. Thank you all. Enjoy a fabulous summer. We will look forward to diving and traveling again pretty soon. But thank you so much, Kristen. Again, thank you for joining us tonight and giving us, making us end on a high note. Beautiful images.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good night, everyone, and have a fabulous summer. Bye-bye.